Welcome. This is the post-secondary transition conversation. We focus on the ins and outs and everything in between of the transition process for families of students with disabilities. I'm one of the hosts. My name is Meghan Smallwood, and I am a public school transition coordinator. As always, I have a co-host.
My name is Patrick Cadigan. I am also a public school transition coordinator.
Today, we are lucky enough to have Beth Brady with us, who is the Director of Admissions and Student Services with Sunflower Bakery. And we actually met just a couple months ago because we held our business fair in our county to try and bring families together with the businesses that offer a lot of inclusive opportunities for employment. And Beth came, and I was aware of Sunflower Bakery because I believe they've been around since 2008. Am I correct with that, Beth?
2009.
2009. Okay, I was close. But I had been, previously out to visit when I started working in the area of transition, and I was just amazed by the program. So I was so excited that you came to join us at the fair and we got to chatting. And I was like, you need to come and chat with me and Patrick. So here we are. And just a short snippet about the Sunflower Bakery. It's grown into a workforce development nonprofit serving hundreds of young adults with disabilities. But I'm going to let you tell us a little bit more about the program. But first, tell us a little about your background, because I know you're fairly new to the program, right?
Sure. So I onboarded here at Sunflower in December. My background, so my last previous position, I was the sole behaviorist for 6 schools, K through 12. I had 4 elementaries, a middle, and a high school. And I served students that were the most at risk. So these would be students with significant, what they call tier 3 behaviors. So these are highly challenging behaviors. These are students that are at risk of being placed somewhere else because of their not being successful at the public school. And my job was to come in and hopefully do interventions, coach the teachers, facilitate behavior intervention plan process, and hopefully see behavioral change where the students could be successful. So, yeah, it was in a rural area up in Pennsylvania, up in Mercersburg. So I got to see students that were different from students I had worked with throughout Maryland. It was, like I said, very rural community. It was great. It was a great position.
And so how did you land at Sunflower Bakery?
As you can imagine, or have probably read about or heard about through the grapevine, there's been a lot of cuts throughout in the United States, particularly in the disability space.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a contracted employee. So my position, unfortunately, was reduced to detriment of the school system, like lots of people in sort of my positions have shared that right here in Montgomery County, we're facing the same thing. We're with longtime professionals, but they downsize positions. So I had, through the grapevine, heard through a friend that about 3 positions that sounded really cool. One was with social emotional learning, and another one was to be a case manager, doing sort of working with people with learning differences. And then finally, Sunflower. So, complete disclosure, I have a brother who is a professional chef who studied at the Scoffier in Paris, who worked at New York's Rainbow Room. So I've always been a bit of a fangirl about, this space. And I heard about this space that trains adults with learning differences. So that's sort of my area of expertise. And then to be in work with culinary arts and pastry arts, it sounded like the perfect job. So I applied for it, and here I am.
That's awesome.
Okay, so we've heard about how you established yourself at Sunflower Bakery. I am relatively unfamiliar with the program. Meghan has had a lot to talk about, but I am curious. Can you walk us through what a typical student experience looks like?
Sure. So we have 3 programs, right? So we have a hospitality program, a culinary arts, and pastry arts program. So if we talk about, so right there's not a typical, right? These are different programs. So we talk, let's say, about a pastry arts student's day. Depends on what phase. We have a phase 1 and a phase 2. The program is 6 months long. So the first phase is going to be 3 months. In that 3 months space, it is going to be soft skills as well as technical skills related to whatever program. So if you were in a pastry arts program, things like how to cream butter, or how to, let's say, use the equipment in that space, the tools in that space. but also soft skills, communication skills, how to effectively communicate, whether that would be with your peers, how to advocate for yourself with a superior, like a boss, how to show up on time, those sort of organizational skills, time management, just that stamina of having to go to work every day, the ebbs and flows of motivation. So lots of students, particularly in this day and age where you have the technology that students are exposed to, that there's this expectation of every day should be a grand day, right? And working that through those kinks of saying that we all have bad days. So even staff will communicate that with our students that, oh, I had a really bad day yesterday. And these are skills that sort of transferable, that not every day is a good day because of, so you're not losing that motivation. So you don't have that job burnout. So those are the sort of the soft skills that we work on. But again, we're working with them for students that have learning differences. So it's sort of simplified and it is digestible for those students.
So you said it's the first part would be 3 months?
Yeah, and then the second part, so now that we're into the second part of our program, that's phase 2, is an immersive experience. So very different from your, other like culinary or pastry arts or hospitality programs where you're sort of let's say you would bake a batch of cookies and then you're taking those cookies home with you, right? Very insulated environment, lots of supports in place as far as, you know, it doesn't look like an actual commercial space. That's what sets us apart. We're an actual commercial space. So students are having an immersive experience. They're feeling the ebbs and flows of production, whether that would be, during the holiday seasons where we have lots of high volume of production versus, let's say, a downsized downtime in like March or something. The same thing that anybody that would be working in this industry would experience. And as a byproduct of that, when students do go into the workplace, they're having that soft landing rather than this sort of cognitive overload that happens often with folks with executive function challenges. So, in my experience, like working with people with learning differences, lots of them will experience it without that sort of sensory piece where they're getting conditioned for that cognitive piece of it, they end up this sort of job jumping if they don't have that immersive experience often. So I think what Sunflower provides is that immersive experience.
How would one know if they like, I have so many students that are like, I'm interested in baking, I'm interested in culinary. Would they get like an intro to what the difference is between pastry arts, hospitality, and culinary? How is it determined which training they might start in?
Great question. So the process goes like this. The application process is they're going to fill out that application along with their last psychological assessment and their last IEP. I take that information, I review it carefully. So I'm looking at things like pragmatic language, adaptive reasoning, all of these things to see which program they would fit best in, right? So if I have a student that, let's say, has really high anxiety, front facing customer service might not be the space for them. But also, if I have a student, let's say, struggles with fine motor skills, putting a knife in that student's hand could be challenging, right? Also, sensory. Let's say I have a student that lots of sensory issues, but really wants to work either baking or culinary. Different spaces. Culinary, you have proteins you're working with, lots of different meats, right? You have a raw chicken, raw meats versus something that most of our students, if not all of our students, are familiar with, something that feels like Play-Doh, something that's very reinforcing for them. So, so I'm looking at that immediately when I'm reviewing their IEPs and psychological assessments. There's a lot of tells in there. But then a student will come in for an interview with me and I'll ask questions related to whatever they're interested in. We do a walkthrough. I let them see the space and see how they respond in the spaces. So a culinary space is different from a pastry arts space for a bunch of reasons. Things like culinary there's a little bit more leeway as far as creativity, as you can imagine, the measurement piece of it, versus pastry where it's very science and very disciplined as far as making sure those ingredients are right, temperatures in the oven, measurements, and then how they respond to that space. We come back in and we have another conversation. But in addition to that, we also will have, if a student is a good fit for the program, then after that, we'll have an assessment, which is a 3-day assessment where they get to see if, the chef will, instructor will give them assessment as far as that space and what's required in that phase. So the fundamentals of it,
Hmm.
nothing major, but there's some measuring involved, some scooping in the pastry. In the culinary, they're going to be putting a chef knife in their hand and see if they can chop the different materials. And after that, a decision is made as far as, recommendations from the instructional staff and recommendation from me. Then we sit together, we make the decision if the student would be a big, good fit for the program.
So it's a very thorough process to
Oh,
decide, which is great to
absolutely.
hear. Hmm.
Yeah, it's very absolutely because as you can imagine, we are working with people that have throughout their life lots of obstacles, right? And I know you, Megan, working with in special ed, know this constantly. There's this almost like a fight to make space for our students. So the last thing we want to do is set anybody up for disappointment.
Right.
So that vetting process and that ensuring that the student is a good fit for the program is paramount.
And so you kind of answered my question about what skills they might need coming in. I know there was a bunch of soft skills you said they work on that if a parent was to say, well, what should I do now to help prepare them? Those are a lot of things like the time management, the organizational. Is there anything else? I think you mentioned measuring. That's something they could be practicing.
For sure. But like foundationally, you want to be, if you can stand on your feet for 4 hours, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of standing involved with that and fine motor skills, of course, but, showing up, the student had to have interest in it, making sure that student is really interested and motivated, I think is really important. Lifting, so up to 25 pounds because there's, heavy bags of flour. There's, your lots of materials and tools that are not going to be light. You'd be able to carry a big tray out of an oven with 5 or 6 loaves of bread on it. That's going to be heavy for some students. So making sure that their ability to pick up, I think up to 25 pounds, but also that dexterity, communication, like depending on the program, I don't want to leave hospitality out of it. That communication piece of it, to be able to be, I think the reading is at a 3rd grade reading level and foundational math skills.
Yeah.
And all of them where you're going to need those foundational math skills. So
Mhm.
so basic math.
You bring up a good point though, because I feel like we lose sight of a lot of those smaller skills that go into just having a job. I feel like I hear from a lot of families and students like, I want to work with this. And so we'll set them up to practice a skill that, indirectly is going to benefit wherever they go. But then there's frustration because they're not in the kitchen baking. But as you mentioned, can you stand on your feet for 4 hours? Can you lift something? Can you clean up your space? Think that's something I hear. They love, prepping and baking and everything, but they don't want to do the cleanup. So there's so many things that I think on our end in the school system, we can have them working to prepare for that and be ready.
You mentioned cleaning, and that's also a big part of our program, right? So their students are required to keep their space clean, and they change out different recipes every day. They're doing multiple recipes, so cleaning that space is throughout the day. They're cleaning their space, and they'll be standing there washing dishes for a
Mhm.
good chunk, cleaning the floors. I mean, every Friday we break everything down, and the whole kitchen is cleaned. Everybody participates in that, and having that sort of understanding that it's not somebody's going to clean up after you,
Right.
that it's your job to clean, and it is, it's a group effort. So,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Being part of a team. I heard a student say they wanted to do a certain job, but they didn't want to clean up. And I said, but that's part of the responsibilities of the job. And the student said, but I do that at home. I don't need to do that at work. I'm like, but you're missing the point. That is your job. So,
Right, right,
no one's coming
right,
behind you soon to take
right.
care of it. So,
Well, and then changing lanes just a bit. And Beth, you have actually touched on this a couple of times throughout the conversation that we've had up until this point. Megan and I have been doing these discussions now for a couple of years, and I feel like we find ourselves in a fairly unique time because of these funding cuts that everyone is talking about, and so many of the people in our communities are being impacted by. So I'm curious, do you guys receive any funding from state agencies such as, and again, full disclosure, we're in the state of Maryland, so for us it's DORS and then also DDA. Do you receive funding from them?
Sure. And yes, we do. So DORS is one of our partners that we work with. We get a fair amount of our students. So I think up to 50% of our students, 60% of our students, depending on the cohort, because we have 4 cohorts: July, October, January, and April. So depending on the cohort, it varies, but around 50% is DORS funded. We also have private pay as well as scholarships to our program. So our scholarships are through fundraising that we do.
So currently not a DDA provider.
So that they'll reimburse. So they it's not direct, but DDA will reimburse. So
Okay.
they apply. Yeah. So the family or the student will go through DDA, and then they'll pay, and then DDA will reimburse. And pretty upfront about having the conversation that makes sure that all those threads are needled, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be in a situation where someone says no.
And you said about the fundraising. Was that where you guys were selling a lot of items? Because I saw on the website you had some delicious products.
So, yeah, so everything relates because we're nonprofit, everything is about this person-centered, right? So the the selling the products is part of what funds our program, right? So no one's getting rich. So the point everybody that works in this space knows no one's getting rich. Everything goes back to what we're doing and working with the students. So yeah, all that the monies that you'll by buying our cookies, by buying our breads and pastries, coffees, that goes directly to funding these programs. Because it's important to note that we have a 2-to-1 ratio in our kitchen of student to instructor. There's always 2 instructors to the 3 to 4 students that are the
Oh, wow.
time. Right. So when people say like, "Oh, this moves really fast," part of the acceleration is the fact that we have that direct instruction. Phase 2 looks a little different. Instructors there, but the students are working independently. The goal has always been, and you know this, Megan, working with students with disability, that you are the goal is always toward independent, fading
Mhm.
out those accommodations. If a accommodation can be faded, it should be faded. And so that's sort of what we do here, try to move toward independence. So the instructor will be there. Unless the instructor sees a student struggling,
Mhm.
that instructor is not intervening. An intervention could be anything from proximity all the way up to hand over hand assistance with a task.
So this is a good place for us to pause our conversation with Beth. But make sure to come back here in 2 weeks' time as we finish out this discussion because there is a lot more to hear.
Is there a possibility that, let's say, a student doesn't make it through phase 1? Would they repeat it, or is there a conversation about if they're what happens next?
Sure. So when a student comes into our program, so I think I shared with you that I review that IEP, I review that psych assessment. I take all of that information and I put it into a snapshot. All of our instructors are professional culinary chefs. So they've gone to schools like CIA or Johnson and Wales. They are not teachers working in special ed. So my job is to create a snapshot that's bite-sized, right? And digestible for them. So I create that snapshot of how to work with that specific student, very, individualized. And then if a student is struggling, the students then will say flagged. And at that point, the team will have a meeting along with the parent and we'll, just like you would do in an IEP, add some interventions, some strategies to better help that student. And then, so things like a check-in and check-out,
Mhm.
sound familiar? Check-in
Yep.
and check-out, or let's say even a daily chart, progress chart, focusing on a goal. And then we'll meet every few weeks after that. If a student is not successful in the program, it depends. So if a student is having a lot of struggles, whether they be behavioral struggles or they just are not being successful, like I shared before, we're not in the business of disappointing people. And we certainly don't want to set anybody up for disappointment. So there have been times where students have not been successful in our program,
Mhm.
but we give it that sort of old college try and we do a lot of interventions in the meantime. So there's not a lot of students that do leave our program. That's the sort of long answer to your question. There's not a whole lot of students, but we do interventions, meeting with families, doing a lot of the very sort of mirroring a lot of the stuff that you have with an IEP.
I see where your behavioral background comes in handy then.
Exactly. So yeah, I have a couple of check-ins and check-outs that I do, and we do have a couple of students that have daily charts, different from the behavioral charts. Like sometimes it's just a goal, like as far as like specific tasks that they're not being successful at or they're lagging compared to their peers.
We hope that you find value in our conversations, and we'd love your support. You can visit our Buy Me a Coffee page to help support the show. A link is in the show notes. Contributions help offset the real costs of producing our discussions, things like online hosting, equipment, and ongoing content development, so we can keep bringing you helpful, accessible transition information. Now, no pressure at all, but if you're able, every bit truly helps. Thanks for listening and giving our community a voice. Hearing you talking about all of this, how do you help graduates transition into employment?
Great question. So we also have a job placement program. So throughout the program, I told you about those snapshots and those we do have also progress reviews in addition to the snapshot where we have with the family meeting on a monthly basis. And during those times, our job placement team will sit in on those meetings because they want to get to know the student and what the student's areas of strength and any deficits that student may have so they can successfully prepare them for, we have employer partners, but also the students, when they get to job placements, they learn how to fill out an application, how to write a resume. We'll do mock interviews, and then our coaches will take them out and go on with interviews with them as well. And until we find a position for them.
And you mentioned you had employer partners. Where are some of the places that your graduates have gone on to tour?
Wegmans they have their bakery there. They
Yep.
have lots of culinary spaces within Wegmans. Students have worked at Wegmans. Wegmans is an incredible employee partner. Paris Baguette, Bundt Cake, and then Tate, and smaller restaurants throughout the DC metro area. Lots of
That's
employee
awesome.
partners. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that we've had with our work program some students who have shown interest work in the bakery of the grocery stores. And there are some great people out there who see like the skills within them and just work with them alongside closely to give them more and more. And it's great to see the inclusivity on that end.
We're seeing a lot of that now. Hilton came out recently. I think I might have shared it with you when I had met with you, that Hilton came out with a study it was in the fall.
Oh,
Uh,
yes, you shared that with me. That was very interesting.
and what it says is that 60% of people with disabilities that are employed end up working in the hospitality space. In addition to that, people with learning differences are 3.5 times more likely to stay at a job than their counterparts. So when people had seen this, with particularly in the hospitality industry, and there is a bit of they're scrambling for employers because there's a lot of stuff that's going on, and this is globally happening. They're looking to see better ways to sort of accommodate. This is a huge swath of our population, and this is a group that to make space for them is lucrative and advantageous for the employer. So particularly in the hospitality space. So like I said, places like Hilton and other big companies are expanding to better be more accommodating for our students.
One of the things that I think is so cool is, like I had said before, I walked into this discussion and I really didn't have a firm understanding of what Sunflower is and what it does. But then on top of that, you also come with an education background. So wearing those two hats at one time or another, what advice would you give businesses that want to become more inclusive employers?
I think the first step is that sort of gatekeeper space. I think the way in which they recruit is really important. So when I see when I see these advertisements, whether on Indeed or other spaces, excellent communication skills becomes a deterrent automatically, right? So
Mhm.
you're looking at that and thinking, that's not me. So maybe I don't want to say lowering the expectation, but more of simplifying the expectation so it becomes accessible just to the audience that's reading that. It sounds like, oh, this place is going to make space for me. Having that in and of itself, I think would be attractive to people in the learning differences space. But also like simplifying language, being accessible in terms of how they train people with learning differences. I think there's this huge gap from what we do in education, or what I did in education, where we're chunking materials, simplifying language, allowing wait time for processing information, that sort of a thing. And that's, again, that goes to the gatekeeper who are doing the interviews, that you're allowing for that wait time, not simplifying the language, that sort of a thing. And then if and when you hire somebody with a learning difference, that within that space, simple things like color coding some of the equipment is helpful. Maybe just all around, just sort of making space for people. If that makes sense. I'm trying to think more about as far as specifics as it would be color coding materials, simplifying directions, like that the training in and of itself, I think, needs to be simplified as far as that language goes, and allow that processing time. Yeah.
And I think, like, that's something that could work for anybody, right? Like, color coding or simplifying or putting a visual up, like, everyone benefits from that. I
Oh, thank you
mean,
for the visual aids. That's the
yeah,
one. Thank you. Yeah.
I
So
mean,
yeah,
I can
having
use a
those
visual.
visual aids.
Yeah.
Yes. And we all use it, right? So like when we're
Mhm.
driving along the highway, the red stop sign is a red stop sign for a reason. If you look at your stoplights, it's red, green, and yellow. But there's a reason why it's not one, because if people have color blindness. So if it's one, if it's just flashing red and it goes yellow and green, somebody's not
Mhm.
distinguishing between those colors. So you have it stacked on top of each other. Throughout life, we have that. We have signs and we have indications for all of us. And if it accelerates learning for somebody with a learning difference, it accelerates learning for all of us.
Mhm.
I do a training with our staff here because, again, I'm working with culinary professionals to better understand executive functioning and processing, particularly related to working memory. So I do an exercise where I shut the lights down and I read 7 complex words related to things like boating or, let's say, automotive, but they're complex, multi-syllable words. And I say, close your eyes, and I give them 7. And I said, and I'll ask, can somebody repeat the 7 words that I just shared with you? 0 hands are raised because the average human being is not retaining 7 complex words that they never heard before. And I flip the lights back on. I take those same words and I apply them to a boat and a car. And I give them 5 words. And then I say, how many of you can tell me with everybody's hands up? And I said, okay, so I just gave you a demonstration of the same information, but I made it accessible for all of you. And the difference is, I'm working with a person with a learning difference, is that you got to have the lights out. And so I preserved your dignity, right? And I didn't put you on the spot. So just imagine the person with a learning difference, giving them multiple words, multiple syllables coming at them with an audience watching them. And you just see heads like your face right now nodding. The same
Mhm.
thing happens over and over again when I do this presentation. And the turnaround, and again, I'm working with people that are professional culinary chefs. The turnaround in the way in which we communicate with our students, you see these improvements. And over time, you see the adjustments. So when you talk about making space, there's an example of making space.
That's a great example, and one that I think a lot of businesses would benefit from hearing. And I think, like, the data speaks for itself. Like, you shared how the longevity of their employment is just so much greater than someone who might not have a disability. They wanna work, they're motivated to be there. I mean, we've met many individuals that graduated from our school system that are at the same job 15 years later because they're so proud of what they do. So I think it's just a matter of continuing to break through to the businesses and to show them what they have to offer. So we appreciate all the work you're doing on in your organization to do that.
Thank you so much. And absolutely. And there's another fun fact or statistic. 85% of the public want to see people with learning differences and
Mhm.
people with disabilities in the professional spaces. 85%. That's staggering. I was just recently talking to a gentleman who has a nonprofit in London, and he works trying to make it's an alliance for making space for people with disabilities. And he works with big organizations and big corporations. And he shared with me about the people that he worked with, one of the employers. And it's some big hotel in London, and they have a person with Down syndrome that works at the front desk. And when they got feedback, it was at 90% of customer feedback was their favorite person in the hotel was this young man. So
Really.
just to give you perspective, this person is making a difference for the customers, so that's your bottom line. So I think conveying that and communicate that and the awareness of that is going to be paramount because the public wants it and it's beneficial for both the employer and the employee. So
Just out of curiosity, what's the most popular item that they make
uh,
at Sunflower Bakery?
sure. So it's the challah bread is one of our sort of premier items, and that is signature items here. Everybody loves that. We have lines coming in on Thursdays for people lining up for the challah bread, and we do a bunch of different flavors, and it's really amazing. We also have tons of gluten-free items, dairy-free. Yeah, so we have dairy-free as well. Are you a gluten-free guy?
My wife is.
So I'm gonna hook you up right now. That we have this. I say this because I never really delve into that space before of gluten-free, but then when somebody was talking about this apricot cupcake that we have here, and I was like, "Why not?" And I began, like, cutting it into 4. I thought I'm just gonna have a quarter, and then I'm just gonna put the rest away. I'm just not gonna eat that. So I started with a quarter of it, graduated to half, and then the whole thing was just devoured, and I'm like, "That might have been the best cupcake I've ever had." And I'm not just because I work here, I am telling you, I've been lined up for this cupcake. It is phenomenal, it's super pretty, and then the other item is lemon bars. We do these amazing lemon bars that are phenomenal. Only because I'm prejudiced, all of our items are amazing, and the people that make them are amazing, so
That's the best part about it, yeah.
That's one of my questions also is that, okay, so I understand that you have the customers in terms of the most popular items, but from the participants themselves, do they have particular favorites that stand
it
out to you?
depends. They come out, so they're all lined up. So fun part of my job, because I'm working with students, and particularly I told you, like, some students that will need additional supports, and I see success, they'll come into my office and I'll say, "I have something special for you." So I get a little bit of inside scoop of what they like. Lots of cookies. They really
Mhm.
like our cookies, the big cookies with sprinkles. They like the chocolate chip cookies. They're big cookie. The students like the cookies.
So we showcased Sunflower Bakery a lot, and I'm sure there's people listening here who are gonna ask, how can they support your mission? What can they do to help keep you going?
Oh, I love this question. So there's multiple ways to support us. Of course, there is on our website, like just donating to our company. Like you could go online and there's a barcode there. You can donate money. You can, of course, come in here and just buy our cookies and our pastries and all of our treats. But in addition to that, there's also the volunteer opportunities. So we're opening up for volunteers to come in. We do obviously a security check on anybody that would choose to come on board. But yeah, come on board and volunteer with us. You could help out in the kitchen, whether that's work side by side with some of our pastry chefs and our culinary chefs, or work to help out our students. That would be great.
Oh, that's fun for someone. I'm thinking like a high school student or college student who is interested in the culinary field, and then they get to work alongside these individuals. Like, what a great opportunity.
Absolutely. And we do have lots of volunteers coming in, but particularly around the holiday season too, like
Mhm.
packing, they'll come in and help us pack. But working with the students, like a lot of times they'll work with the students because of, again, it's a busy space. So coming in and having that opportunity to interface with people with learning differences is really, it's beneficial to everybody.
This is actually kind of taking a step back a little bit, but I am curious now. You had mentioned you employ professional chefs. How do they find you, or do you find that there is a particular characteristic of the chefs that you ultimately end up hiring?
That's a great question. You have to have the right temperament to work with students with learning differences. Patience, really, really important. So having some understanding or maybe worked with in some time with people with learning differences is helpful. I also, part of my job here is to do trainings. We do trainings on Mondays, about once a month that we're doing trainings where I talk about things like the ABCs of behavior, antecedent behavior and consequence, talk about how to respond to a student that may be struggling. So your help prompt weight strategies,
Mhm.
or we'll talk about executive functioning, how to work with students with have, issues with processing or students that may have issues with you know, memory and stuff like that. So yeah, we do trainings routinely, but definitely we want chefs to come in here that work with our students that are interested in working with our students and motivated. That's
Mhm.
paramount because we are student centered and everything's about our students. So having people that really want to work
Yeah.
in with students with learning differences is really important. Oftentimes, what you'll find at Sunflower is a direct connection to somebody that has had a disability. For complete disclosure, I have a brother who had a car accident when he was in second grade, and had a traumatic brain injury, a little bit older. So, that was back in the day where we had self contained classrooms. This is
Mhm.
long before IDEA 2004. And as a byproduct of that, it sort of enabled me to be an advocate and want to do something in this space. And what you'll find at Sunflower is a large percentage of our population that works with our students have some connection to that space. And as a result of that, their level of empathy, their level of compassion, super high.
I'm glad to hear you say that because my background, I am a parent. I have two children, but they are neurotypical. And the people that I have surrounded myself with, and Megan is one of them, she's probably at the forefront of it. One of the things that I've always found interesting is that she's so good at what she does, but she'll be the first to tell you about her sister. She has had that experience. And when we were talking about the Business for All fair, so many of the conversations that I heard people having, this was from both Megan and Aaron, the other transition coordinator who put on the show, that it seemed like that there would be an easier path into employment if someone that they were working with had a background or an understanding of that population. And so it's always been, for me, I've always considered myself to be an outsider. So I always find it fascinating when I watch what you guys do.
Yeah, and we will see that when we go to new businesses to start talking about our work programs. A lot of times the whoever I'm talking to, the manager, the owner will be like, "Oh, well, my cousin has a disability or I grew up next to a neighbor with it." Like there's people everyone has a connection in some way or another. And I think that's a way for them to understand and then grow on that conversation from there. And it has changed like you said, my sister was in self-contained as well when she was in school growing up, but now she does work and has a job for a couple days a week, so it is interesting to see how it's transformed, and I think, like, we just need to make sure the rest of the world is catching up.
For sure. It's that 6 degrees of separation. Down in the islands on vacation and we're just swimming, and then I end up getting a conversation with a couple from New England, and then with of course, the conversation is like, "What do you do?" And so what
Mhm.
I do comes up and immediately shared with me that they have 2 children they're neurodiverse and fascinated by what I did, and their sons are, like, in the transition space. So, yeah, it's we all know it now. I think that particularly when we see the rise in autism spectrum disorder, that there's so many people that it's almost impossible not to be somehow connected in
Yeah.
some way to it. And it's like that saying that when you know better, you have a responsibility to do better. And I think people recognize that more and more that we have to take on these responsibilities as a
Yeah.
society.
Well, Beth, we cannot thank you enough for coming on and talking with us
Well,
about
thank
all
you
of this stuff.
anytime.
Yeah,
And
and
if
I
there's
have
any
you on my list for the fall so we can touch base about Beth was telling me that she had got, like, pushed into some of the classes in Montgomery to kinda do, like, a demo of what they do there, so and I know I've talked to a couple of our transition teachers of students that would be great to do this with, so I definitely would love to talk more about that and then to get our teachers over to see the space.
I host sometimes we'll host teachers during staff development days. So teachers,
Oh,
not
nice.
yeah, so if you guys I do a tour and I'll do
Okay.
a presentation. I know, and we have snacks in the back. We'll take a walk through and do a
Mhm.
presentation. I'll share
Awesome.
Beth's fun facts about what's going on in the hospitality industry.
That's awesome, I love it.
Well, Beth, and then do a quick plug. How can people find Sunflower?
Well, they can find us online. Just go to Sunflower Bakery and it comes right up. It's actually one of the first places that comes up. If you put in learning for students with learning differences, that'll also come up.
Well, again, we
Awesome.
thank you for coming out and talking with us.
Yes, this was
Thank you.
great.
I
Really
appreciate you
awesome.
guys.
Well,
Yeah, we appreciate you.
yeah, thank you.
Our discussions are everywhere: Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music, and others. So hit the follow button and you won't miss out. Please help us spread the word about our discussions by leaving us a review. Links to the information from our conversations are always in our show notes. Surf to our sister website, www.postsecondary-transition.com, full of information and links to more resources. Our YouTube channel contains curated videos that revolve around transition, including playlists for guardianship, alternatives to guardianship, ABLE accounts, and more to come. Thanks so much for your time spent with us, and we look forward to talking again soon.